Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritat tatir sabhigyaswara. Tenne Brahma Vridaya Adhika Vaye Mo Jantija Suraya. Tejo Varimrida Jata Vinemayo Jatra Trisago Mrisya. Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyang Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Krishna because he is the primeval cause of all causes. Oh, sorry, he is the absolute cause of all causes. The primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire and land seen in water. Because of him, due to material universes, or it temporarily manifested by the reaction of three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the reaction to the three modes of material nature, the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma prajita kaitavutro paramanirmasaranam satam Vedyam vastavam vastus Shivadam tapotrayomulanam Srimad-Bhagavate Mahamuni Kritik Kimva Kimva Parishwara Sadhyo Rudya Varidya Titra Kritibi Shushushubi Tatkyanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavatam Puranam propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in the heart. The highest truth, their reality is distinguished from illusion from the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity, it is self-sufficient for God realization. What is the need of the other scripture? As long as one attentively, submissively hears the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam, by the culture of this knowledge, the supreme knowledge is established within his heart. Nigama kalpator galitam palam Sukhamukhatamrita Dravi Sangitam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhurahura Sikabhu Vibabuka. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired true Vedic trees. And then? Oh, is it emanated from the list of Shukadev Goswami? Therefore, this food has become more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including the liberated souls.
Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna.
Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantaksto hi Bhadrani.
Hridyantaksto hi Bhadrani.
Vidu noti suhitsatam.
Vidu noti suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures.
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic literature.
Or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad-Gita.
And to hear from
is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna,
when one hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart.
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart.
Acts as a best wishing friend.
Acts as a best wishing friend.
And purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
It purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
Nasta presu badresu.
Nasta praesha badreshu.
Nityam bhagavata sevaya.
Nityam bhagavata sevaya.
Bhagavati uttamasloke.
Bhagavati uttamasloke.
Bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam.
And from the devotees.
And from the devotees.
He becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
He becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava.
Tadarajastamo bhava.
Kamalobhadayaschaye.
Kamalobhadayaschaye.
Cheta etayaranavidam.
Cheta etayaranavidam.
Stitvam sadve prasidati.
Stitvam sadve prasidati.
By development of devotional service.
By development of devotional service.
One becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance.
One becomes free from the modes of passion and ignorance.
And thus material lusts and avarice are diminished.
And thus material lusts and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasanna manaso.
Evam prasanna manaso.
Bhagavad bhakti yogataha.
Bhagavad bhakti yogataha.
Bhagavad tattva vijnanam.
Bhagavad tattva vijnanam.
Mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta sangasya jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
when those impurities are wiped away,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness.
The candidate remains steady in position of pure
becomes
goodness.
Enlivened by devotional service.
Becomes enlivened by devotional service.
And understands the science of God perfectly.
And understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis.
Vidyate hridaya grantis.
Chidyante sarva samsaya.
Chidyante sarva samsaya.
Chiyante chasya karmani.
Chiyante chasya karmani.
Drista evat manishware.
Drista evat manishware.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the heart not of material affection.
Thus, the Bhakti Yoga severs the heart not of material
and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram. Understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Understanding the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or his devotee in Krishna consciousness.
Can one understand the science of Krishna?
Can one understand the science of Krishna?
Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse number 14. Yavanajayate paravaresmin.
Yavanajayeta paravaresmin.
Vishvesware drastari bhakti yoga.
Visheshware drastari bhakti yoga.
Tavat staviya purushasya rupam.
Tavat staviya purushasya rupam.
Kriya vasane prayata smarita.
Kriya vasane prayata smarita.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Unless the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord is the seer of all worlds, both material and transcendental. In other words, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate beneficiary and enjoyer of all worlds, as confirmed in the Bhagavad-Gita 5:29. The spiritual world is the manifestation of his internal potency, and the material world is a manifestation of his external potency. The living entities are also his marginal potency, and by their own choice they can live in either the transcendental or material worlds. The material world is not a fit place for living entities because they are spiritually one with the Lord, and in the material world, the living entities become conditioned by the laws of the material world. The Lord wants all living entities, who are his parts and parcels, to live with him in the transcendental world, and for enlightening conditioned souls in the material world, all the Vedas and the revealed scriptures are there, expressly to recall the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Unfortunately, the conditioned living entities, although suffering continually the threefold miseries of conditioned life, are not very serious about going back to Godhead. It is due to their misguided way of living, complicated by sins and virtues. Some of them who are virtuous by deeds begin to reestablish the lost relation with the Lord, but they are unable to understand the personal feature of the Lord. The real purpose of life is to make contact with the Lord and be engaged in his service. That is the natural position of living entities. But those who are impersonalists and who are unable to render any loving service to the Lord have been advised to meditate upon his impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, or universal form. Some way or other, one must try to reestablish one's forgotten relation with the Lord if one at all desires to gain real happiness in life, and to reclaim his natural, unfettered condition. For the less intelligent beginners, meditation on the impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, or universal form of the Lord, will gradually qualify one to rise to personal contact. One is advised herewith to meditate upon the Virat Rupa specified in the previous chapters in order to understand how the different planets, seas, mountains, rivers, birds, beasts, human beings, demigods, and all that we can conceive are but different parts and limbs of the Lord's Virat form. This sort of thinking is also a type of meditation on the absolute truth, and as soon as such meditation begins, one develops one's godly qualities, and the whole world appears to be a happy and peaceful residence for all the people of the world. Without such meditation on God, either personal or impersonal, all good qualities of the human being become covered with misconceptions regarding his constitutional position, and without such advanced knowledge, the whole world becomes a hell for the human being. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, this is another very significant purport because it explains what is our real position in the material world. We are here because we voluntarily chose to separate ourselves from Krishna. And therefore, we're put in the material world to try to be an enjoyer and controller of material nature and of people. But such an activity is destined for failure. That's what people don't understand. It's the law of nature. Everyone will fail in that process of trying to be the enjoyer, dominator, and exploiter of the material nature and people. when we say it's a law of nature, that means it's something that's insurmountable. We can try our best, but it won't work. But yet, people are so stubborn, so obstinate, that they keep trying, and they don't admit failure. Just like Rukmi, the brother of Rukmini Devi, who was the first wife of Krishna in Dwarka. He sometimes would play chess with Krishna, and every time he would lose, he would claim that he won. And finally, this became so intolerable to Krishna that he punished him severely. So this obstinacy, this absolute refusal to accept a fact of life, keeps people, birth after birth, in the material world. And therefore, in this purport, Prabhupada mentions, he says, the material world is not a fit place for living entities because they are spiritually one with the Lord. And in the material world, the living entities become conditioned by the laws of the material world. Well, we've explained this before. There are two sets of laws that we have to follow, and many subsets of those two sets of laws. The first law that we have to follow is the laws established by Krishna, and it's called Dharma. And when we violate those laws, we become more and more entangled in the process of birth and death. Then the second set of laws are the laws of society. They are imperfect laws, and they can be always changing. Like, for example, we're going to see very soon, President Biden is going to try and change some laws about owning guns. As soon as if he can get those laws passed by the Senate and the Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, then automatically hundreds and thousands of Americans will become criminals. Whereas before they could legally own certain types of guns and so forth, they're going to pass laws that make that illegal. So we see that these temporal or materialistic laws of material societies are changing all the time. And what may have been legal previously becomes illegal. Or what may have been illegal previously becomes legal. So we are obliged to follow them because the state or the country run by people, politicians and so forth, they have certain privileges that the individual citizens don't have. For example, they can carry guns, and high caliber guns, and tanks and bombs and things like that. If you own those type of very lethal weapons, you would be arrested. But the government can have them. And then secondly, the government can print money. If you print money, you would be put in jail right away. You see? So the government can do things that we can't do. And they mandate it by law. And most of those laws, some of them may be right, some of them may be patently or completely wrong, but you're still obliged to follow. So anyway, there are two sets of laws, and the laws of Krishna are called Dharma, and violation of those laws are called Adharma. So I wanted to go over some of those laws established by Krishna, because Bhagavad-Gita explains many of them, if not all of them. The first law established by Krishna is the principle of birth, death, old age, and disease. There's no way we can stop this. You want to stop birth with contraceptive methods? Yeah, there are plenty of contraceptive methods today, but the population is still increasing in the world. It might decrease in a certain number of places, but at the same time it increases in other places. So the population, the birth rate around the world has not really decreased. It's only decreased in certain places and increased in other places. So birth, death, old age, and disease, this is law of nature, and nature is under the control of Krishna. Therefore, it's impossible to counter these laws, although people adamantly try to do it. Another important law is explained in Bhagavad-Gita, 3rd chapter, 9th verse. Yajnartat karmano nyatra lokamam karma bandhanai. So that verse explains that people should engage in performing acts of sacrifice for Lord Vishnu or Krishna. Otherwise, whatever work they do causes bondage in the material world. So what is bondage? Bondage means you come under the influence of the modes of material nature, which force you to do things. Although you think you're not being forced, but you're being forced, or we are being forced to do all kinds of things: eating, sleeping, mating, defending, and working hard, and all these different things. We're being forced to do them by the laws of nature, because we're not performing, or people who refuse to perform acts of sacrifice for Krishna become entangled by these laws. Okay, so that's another law of nature. Then there's the law of nature, Srimad-Bhagavatam 5.4, 5th canto, 5th chapter, 4th verse. And that verse says, Nunam Pramata, let's see. It says, Nunam Pramata Kurute Vikarma. And that is in the Nunam Pramata Vikarma. 75. In the 5th chapter, 2nd verse, in the purport, it's quoted, Srimad-Bhagavatam 5.5, it says, people are mad after sense gratification, and they do not know that this present body, which is full of miseries, is a result of one's fruitive activities in the past. Although the body is temporary, it is always giving one trouble in many ways. Therefore, to act for sense gratification is not good. One is considered to be a failure in life as long as he makes no inquiry about his real identity. As long as he does not know his real identity, he has to work for fruitive results for sense gratification. And as long as one is engrossed in the consciousness of sense gratification, one has to transmigrate from one body to another. Although the mind may be engrossed in fruitive activities and influenced by ignorance, one must develop a love for devotional service to Vasudeva. Only then can one have the opportunity to get out of the bondage of material existence. So, in other words, this is the law of nature. As long as we are mad after sense gratification, we don't understand what is the purpose of having a material body and how it should be used. And one thing is definitely a fact: the body is full of miseries. It is not our natural state to have a material body, because we are part and parcel of Krishna. So yesterday we mentioned a point, and this is a very important point. I want to mention it again. Right from the beginning, material education in the schools today mislead children, because right in the beginning they clearly make an emphatic statement that there's only the material body, there's no soul. And number two, they also emphatically say that there's no such thing as an eternal world where everything is absolute and God is present there. Those two things they reject. So anything they teach you after rejecting those two things is going to be false. Because the two most fundamental things that there is that one is not this body, but is the soul that animates the body with consciousness. And that one's original position is to be in the spiritual world, which exists. And the spiritual world and the material world are both emanations of God, of Krishna. So by rejecting those two concepts, anything else they teach you is going to be wrong. And here it explains basically why people are trapped in the cycle of birth and death, because by rejecting those two principles, and they're educated to reject them. So that's not education. They're educated in Maya, misconceptions. Then the only solution in life, about life, to understand life, is that you should engage in sense gratification. Because if you're only a body, you don't really have an eternal soul. And there's no such thing as an eternal world where there's no birth, death, old age, and disease. If you believe those nonsense things, then you believe that then I should squeeze out as much pleasure as I can from this material body. And that's exactly what's happening. And it's glorified in movies, in books, and different types of social media. It's sense gratification. So therefore, this verse from the Bhagavatam, people are mad after sense gratification, and they do not know that this present body, which is full of miseries, is a result of one's fruitive activities in the past. Although this body is temporary, it is always giving one trouble in many ways. That's a fact. Everybody's having trouble with the body, right? In other words, the body is actually a place of suffering. It's not a place of sense gratification. The little sense gratification we have is overshadowed by all the problems we have with the body. You know, the pains and the failing of organs and wounds of the body and insects and worms and different things that get into the body, and viruses and bacteria, all those things. So one is considered to be a failure in life as long as he makes no inquiry about his real identity. As long as he does not know his real identity, he has to work for fruitive results for sense gratification. See, this is the point. They don't teach you in school what is your real identity. Therefore, the kids become cursed to work for fruitive results for sense gratification. And as long as one is engrossed in the consciousness of sense gratification, one has to transmigrate from one body to another. So in the human form, we have a chance to understand all these things and not make this same mistake that we made hundreds and millions of times previously in different bodies. But no, they purposely teach you not to understand these things. And if you mention something in class, just like one time, one of my daughters was in a class at school, and the teacher said that there's only the material world. And my daughter, and that there are no, I think they were talking about something about astronomy, and the teacher said that as far as we know, there are no living entities on other planets. And my daughter raised her hand and said, no, that's not right. There are people on every other planet. And the teachers told her, well, you might believe that, but that's not a fact. We know for a fact There's nobody on other planets, or at least we have not discovered it. And she asked her, well, how do you know there's people on other planets? So, well, my dad told me, and he knows about the Vedic literature. And they said, oh, well, that's your religion. That has nothing to do with science. And my daughter was bewildered when she came home. Dad, she said, Dad, the teacher said there's nobody on other planets. And I said, there is. And she said, no, that's religion. That has nothing to do with science. This is going on in the schools, right? So, therefore, we can see how, right from the beginning, these kids are being programmed to become materialists. And materialism is based on the idea that you don't have a soul that's eternal. You only have this body. And there's no such thing as the spiritual world. There's only the material world. Okay, so another law of nature. So, I mean, these verses, Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad-Bhagavatam 4 verses 4 to 6, explains what happens when one has misconceptions. And the grossest misconception is that the purpose of life is sense gratification because you don't have a soul and there's no spiritual world. Okay, so then next, Bhagavad-Gita 8:16. Bhagavad-Gita 8:16 says, Abrahma bhuvanaloka punar avartin origina mama peti tukonteya punar janma navidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death takes place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So you can see how in the verses of Bhagavad Gita, it makes it very clear there is such a thing as a material world, and there is such a thing as a spiritual world. And both of these are realities, right? But the material world is a place where the laws of nature are acting. And what are the laws of nature? As long as you have a material body, it's subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. There's no way you can change it. You can believe, if you want, the false idea of cryonics. Cryonics means you can freeze the body right before death and unfreeze it in the future when the scientists have figured out how to heal the sickness of your body or how to heal old age, etc. That's completely false. You cannot do that because it's the law of nature that the material body is going to die. There's no way you can preserve it or revive it once it's dead. And then another thing, this myth that one can be happy in the material world through sense gratification. Well, this verse says it's not possible, that every planet, from the highest planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest, are places of misery, where there's repeated birth and death. So, this is a law of nature. And the law of nature is established by the supreme lawmaker named Krishna. So how are you going to overcome these laws? But yet, people are not taught these laws. Kids are not taught these laws. You can only understand this through Bhagavad Gita. Then another important principle is 8th chapter, 6th verse, which says, Yam yam vapi smanam bhavam tiyajat ante kalevaram tam tam ivaiti konteya sadatad bhava bhavata. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So if you think about your dog at the moment of death, or you think about your cat, or you think about your 401k, or you think about your stock profile, stock folio, or you think about some person you had sense gratification with, or you think about this, or you think about that, you take birth again and you become entangled somewhere in the vicinity of that thing that you thought about. So we've seen an example of Bharat Maharaj. He thought about the deer at the moment of death, and he became a deer. So this is a law of nature. And Prabhupada says, in the purport, the process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. So, in other words, the moment of death is the ultimate moment of our life, because what happens at the moment of death will determine what's going to happen to us next, in our next birth. Either we go back to Godhead, or we take birth again in the material world, in another miserable material body, and continue the cycle of suffering. So that's not taught. They don't. Did you ever hear that the moment of death is the most important moment in your life? No, not at all. They downplay it. Death is a bad thing. Nobody wants to die, but actually, devotees are trained how to die. How about that? How about real education, right? They avoid that real education, and they teach you how to have sense gratification while you're still living a short lifetime. And that will divert your attention from the ultimate moment of life, which is the moment of death, where everything you have learned in life is going to be tested. And if you learned all a bunch of junk, then you're going to fail that most important moment of death and start all over again. Just like the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a person who was cursed. His curse was every time he had to push a heavy rock up a mountain. And as soon as it got to the top of the mountain, it fell down again to the bottom of the mountain. Then he had to start all over again to push it up to the top of the mountain. And that's his curse. He has to do that eternally for being a sinful person. So that's what happens when you get material education. You get the curse of Sisyphus. And you have to repeat birth, old age, disease, and death over and over and over and over again. Right? So this 8.6 is an important law of nature. And then 16.10, Bhagavad-Gita 16.10. What does that say? Yeah. Sorry. 16.10 says, Kamam asritya duspuram dambamana madan vitaha mohad grihit vasad graham pravartante suchivrata. Taking shelter of insatiable lust and absorbed in the conceit of pride and false prestige, the demoniac, thus illusioned, are always sworn to unclean work, attracted by the impermanent. This is the law of nature, you see. So, as long as we have insatiable lust, in other words, one is never satisfied, no matter how much sense gratification they have. And one has the conceit of pride. Well, what does the word conceit mean? Look it up. Conceit, C-O-N-C-E-I-T. It means cheating. Or it should mean something like cheating, or cheating oneself and cheating others. What's it say? C-O-N-C-E-I-T. What?
Excessive pride in oneself.
Excessive pride and?
Pride in oneself.
In oneself. Okay. Okay, so conceit. In other words, you're cheating yourself by this excessive pride. Pride means you're overestimating who you are, right? And so it says, taking shelter of insatiable lust and absorbed in the conceit of pride. In other words, thinking that you're much greater than than what you actually are, right? And false prestige. Yeah, that's another corollary of pride. false prestige. The demoniac, thus illusioned, are always sworn to unclean work. Yeah, unclean work. Abortion and different types of sexual perversions and infidelity. And there's a whole list of things that are unclean work. Intoxication and all kinds of different things. Attracted by the impermanent. So they're only engaged with impermanent activities, nothing eternal, and all about sense gratification and the downside of sense gratification, which is perversion. See? Just like nowadays, movies have to become more and more violent and more intense about sense gratification. Why? Because you can go on the internet and see so many movies nowadays for free, and those are older movies usually. So they have to now make movies that are so extremely violent and extremely showing sense gratification that people want to pay to see the new movies, even though they can see the older movies, which were less violent and less full of sense gratification, for free. That's why the movies that you see nowadays are extremely violent and extremely rife with sense gratification. Right? Whereas before, they were a little bit more docile, a little bit less extreme. So that the newer movies, you have demons that are bigger demons than they showed in the older movies. And they're much more extreme than before. That's why people are willing to pay to see them. Whereas they can see so many movies for free on the internet now. So you can see how there's this extreme degradation, moral, ethical degradation. And usually the bad guys are more real than the good guys in the movies. The bad people are more real, and people identify with the bad people, even though in many movies, in the end, the bad guys are defeated. But they also make movies now where the bad guys win. So this is all part of this verse, which says, taking shelter of insatiable lust. In other words, instead of taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, they take shelter of insatiable lust and absorbed in the conceit of pride and false prestige. Can you see what the secondary definition of conceit, or second or third definition is?
Fanciful expression in writing or speech, an elaborate metaphor.
Anything else? Any other meanings?
So far there have been only two.
Only two. Okay.
One more. And artistic effect or device.
Artistic what?
Effect
Effect or
or
device.
device. Another is a fanciful notion.
A fanciful notion. Yeah. It's also used in the sense of cheating. Okay. Anyway, so then another law of nature is 1619. Tamaham dvisata kruran sama resu naradamam shripam ajasram asubam asurisveva yonisu. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, I perpetually cast into the ocean of material existence and into various demoniac species of life. Ouch. So Prabhupada says, in this verse, it is clearly indicated that the placing of a particular individual soul in a particular body is the prerogative of the Supreme Will. That means Krishna does this through his agent Yamaraj, forcing people to be placed in a particular type of body based on their karma. The demonic person may not agree to accept the supremacy of the Lord, and it is a fact that he may act according to his own whims. But his next birth will depend upon the decision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and not on himself. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, it is stated that an individual's soul, after his death, is put into the womb of a mother where he gets a particular type of body under the supervision of superior power. Therefore, in the material existence, we find so many species of life, animals, insects, men, and so on. All are arranged by the superior power. They are not accidental. That's the point. There's nothing accidental of what happens to a person at the point of after death. As for the demoniac, it is clearly said here that they are perpetually put in the wombs of demons, and thus they continue to be envious, the lowest of mankind. Such demoniac species of men are held to be always full of lust, always violent and hateful, and always unclean. The many kinds of hunters in the jungle are considered to belong to the demoniac species of life. Wow. Okay. So that's law of nature. And then 1620 says, Asurim yonim apana. Attaining repeated birth amongst the species of demoniac life, O son of Kunti, such persons can never approach me. Gradually, they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. This is a law of nature. They never approach me, Krishna says. So, is there any hope for people like demons? Yes. What is the hope? Sadhu Sangha. If they meet a real devotee, the devotee has the power to change their mind, just like Narada Muni changed the mind of Magrari. Narada Muni changed the mind of another hunter who was Magrari, and then the other hunter was the author of the Ramayana. Valmiki, yeah. So we see that a pure devotee can give mercy even to the worst demon, right? And Krishna also can give mercy to the worst demon, like Hiranyakashipu or Ravana or Kamsa, by killing them. And that's actually merciful, because then they get liberation. However, if someone doesn't have that good fortune, they are cursed, birth after birth, to take demoniac bodies. It's a law of nature. Okay, and then 1623. 1623 says, he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination. This is the law of nature. In other words, someone who rejects Krishna's instructions, and injunctions are instructions that are actually laws. You're obliged to follow them. Someone who rejects these, they will never attain perfection, happiness, or supreme destination, meaning going back to Godhead. It's the law of nature. Okay, and then there's Bhagavad-Gita 5:22. 5:22 says, this is something that kids should learn. It's something that we should all learn. These are laws of nature. So 5:22 says, law of nature. The more one is addicted to material pleasure, the more one is entrapped by material miseries. This is something people will argue against over and over again, adamantly, because if they accept this, that means they have to give up sense gratification. And because they're so attached to sense gratification, they'll say, that's not true, this is a lie, I don't believe it, which means I don't want to believe it because I want to continue my sense gratification. But it's a fact. The more one's addicted to material pleasure, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. And then another law of nature, 6.8. 6.8 says, a person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stone, or gold, as the same. So there are certain laws that are negative, and there are other laws that are positive, right? So this is one of the positive laws. I didn't note too many of the positive ones. That's something I'll do. But this is a law of nature. Someone who's established in self-realization is a real yogi or mystic. When he's fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization, in other words, by hearing Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam and assimilating it and realizing it, such a person then is situated in transcendence. That means they're above the influence of the modes of material nature and is self-controlled. They're not being forced to do anything by nature anymore, by the modes. He sees everything, whether it be pebble, stone, or gold, as the same. In other words, he's not, he has a state of neutrality. It's the beginning of transcendental life. Okay, and then 431. 431. It's an important verse. 431 says, O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? In other words, one will not be happy now, not in this life, and one will not be happy in the next life without sacrifice. So Prabhupada explains, whatever form of material existence one is in, one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. In other words, existence in the material world is due to multiple reactions to our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's dragging on in material existence. The human form of life is the only loophole in which one may get out of this entanglement. The Vedas, therefore, give us a chance for escape by pointing out the paths of religion, economic comfort, regulated sense gratification, and at the last, the means to get out of the miserable condition entirely. The path of religion, or the different kinds of sacrifice recommended above, automatically solves our economic problems. By performance of yajna, we can have enough food, enough milk, etc., even if there is so-called increase of population. When the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. The Vedas prescribe, therefore, sacred marriage for regulated sense gratification. Thereby, one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from material bondage. And the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna, sacrifice, as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to the Vedas, how can he expect a happy life, even in this body? And what to speak of another body or another planet? There are different grades of material comforts in different heavenly planets. And in all cases, there is immense happiness for persons engaged in different kinds of yajna. But the highest kind of happiness that a man can achieve is to be promoted to the spiritual planets by practice of Krishna consciousness. A life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all the problems of material existence. So unless we accept sacrifice, we'll never be happy. It's a law of nature. And what is sacrifice? It's not like fasting to death for a political reason. That's not sacrifice. Although it looks like sacrifice, but it's not. Real sacrifice is sacrificing sense gratification in order to have time and energy for Krishna conscious activities. That's sacrifice. Right? Okay. Then 440, and I'll stop in a minute. 440 says, Ajnaschashadadanasya samsayatma vinasyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham samsayatmanaha. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. What do they teach you in schools? You must doubt. You must question everything. That's what they teach you in school. They teach you what they think is called intellectual doubt. But actually, it's not intellectual doubt. It's dummy's doubt or stupid doubt. So, in other words, they teach that you should doubt everything. And that is the sign of of intelligence, by doubting everything. And then by doubting it, then, well, it's in a sense, it's not a fact, but in a sense they call it the Socratic method. What is the Socratic method? Socrates would go around Athens and he would meet people. And in the conversation with this new person that he met, he would say, do you know what real humility is? And the person would say, yes, I do. And he'd try to explain it. And then Socrates would ask him a few questions. And then finally the person would admit, I don't really know what humility is. And then Socrates would, well, I don't either, but let's discuss this some more and research it, and maybe we'll find out what it is. So, in other words, Socrates would put a doubt in that person's mind by asking him questions about the explanation he would give about humility. And finally the person would admit that he doesn't really know what humility is. And then they would embark on a mutual process of trying to understand what is real humility. That's the Socratic method. But that has become degenerated to the idea that you can question everything, including God, right? And that's the sign of real intelligence. Well, it's not, because if you question the existence of God, you're denying your own existence also. And that's another law of nature that we'll come to in a minute. So how can we say that? So this is a controversial issue, but it says, but ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. So doubting everything all the time is a disease. It's not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of obstinacy and ignorance. How can you doubt? Can you doubt the fact that you have a mother and father? No. And the same way, can you doubt that there's a God who's the original father of all living entities? No. It doesn't make sense to doubt that. But yet, if you insist on doubting that, it ruins your whole life. And that's what kids are taught, to doubt the existence of a supreme God. So therefore, they fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. So the atheists, they are these doubting souls. We read the other day the atheist platform, and that is, their platform is, it's never been proven, although it's been discussed since the the farthest antiquity up until today, the existence of God. And it's never really been proven. That's what they say. That's not true. Of course it's proven. Proven in Bhagavad-Gita, proven in Srimad Bhagavatam. But yet, they insist that it's never been proven, that God's existence has never been proven. So that type of doubting condemns one. God doesn't condemn them. They condemn themselves. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor the next. Okay. So then, another principle is fourth chapter, 5th verse. Sorry. 4th chapter, 5th verse is a famous verse where Krishna tells Arjuna that never, let's see, what's that? 4th chapter, 5th verse. He says, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So it's a law of nature that when you die and take birth again, you forget your past, previous life, and previous lives. And it's a law of nature. Why is there such a law? So if you could remember, then you would be forced to be Krishna conscious. But to give you a chance to have freedom of will, at least you have the freedom to accept or reject Krishna in every new lifetime, you forget. So Arjuna forgot that he was with Krishna when Krishna explained to Vivaswan the Bhagavad-Gita, and when Krishna explained to Ikshvaku the Bhagavad-Gita, and so forth. And when Krishna explained to Manu the Bhagavad-Gita, he was there, but he forgot, because he changed his body. But Krishna never changes his body. His body is non-different than his soul. So therefore, he says to Arjuna, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Okay, so that's a law of nature. And then the 3rd chapter, 37th verse, and we'll stop with this one. 3rd chapter, there are a lot more. These are all laws of nature. 3rd chapter, 37th verse says, Kama esa krodha esa raga guna samudbhavan mahasana mahapatma vidi enam ihavairinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world is not Trump. It's not Putin. It's not Stalin. It's not Hitler. It's not this. It's not that. It's lust. And lust is something that we all have. Lust is coming from love. Originally we had love for Krishna, but it was changed into lust for sense gratification by education, by bad association, by becoming convinced of false things, right? By conceit or false pride, and so forth. So Prabhupada says, when a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns to wrath or anger. Wrath or anger is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. Now, I can show you statements by famous people who say that the purpose of life is to increase your lust. See, one thing that keeps a person entangled in material life, they're glorifying it, you know, to be lusty. So when lust is denied or frustrated, one becomes angry and one develops greed. So it's a very bad thing to be lusty. Lust means excessive material desire. It's like a perversion. The mind is perverted by this excessive, uncontrollable material desire. Okay, we'll stop right there, and we'll continue this tomorrow. And tomorrow also we'll mention a whole bunch of positive laws of nature. Are there any questions? Yes. I have to come to the microphone. Sorry.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hey, bro.
So today we studied in Bhagavad-Gita 16:19. It is stated that all is arranged by superior power and they are not accidental. But sometimes, like I have read some articles where people have stated that they died and they had their soul go out and Yamraj took it away, and they came back to their body and they became alive again. So how can we explain that in this context?
Yes. Well, first of all, the people who say that, are they acharyas? No. So that's point one. Point two is that's a personal experience. It may or may not be true. So obviously, death is inevitable for everyone. So if someone has what's called near death, those things are called near death experience. Look that up in the dictionary, near death experience. They claim to die, and then they claim that they came back again. And while they were so-called dead, they saw certain things. Those are called near death experiences. Because death is absolute. When your soul leaves the body, you're finished. Now, you have the example of Ajamila, who died, but then he was given a second chance, right? And he remembered what happened when he died. What does it say, near-death experience?
A near-death experience is a profound personal experience associated with death or impending death.
Or what?
Impending.
Impending death. I-M-P-E-N-D? Yeah, that means you're on the verge of death. It doesn't mean you died.
Which researchers claim share similar characteristics.
Similar what? Characteristics?
Characteristics.
Yeah.
When positive, such experiences may encompass a variety of.
What? No. What? May what?
Encompass. E-N-C-O-M-P-A-S-S.
E-N?
Encompass.
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 Yeah. Encompass. I don't understand. It's not English. That's English or something, Okay. Encompass.
Encompass a variety of senses.
Now, see, the reason you're mispronouncing it, you're putting the emphasis on the second syllable. It's encompass. If you say encompass, that's a mispronunciation. That's the French pronunciation. It's not the English pronunciation. Put the emphasis on the first syllable. Okay, go ahead.
Including detachment from the body, feelings of levitation.
Okay, so these are feelings in a near-death experience, right? It doesn't mean that person definitely died and came back. And it's a personal opinion, right? I can say, oh, I think I died, but and then I saw these things, and I came back again. So that's a personal opinion. We don't know. It's not an acharya. We don't know for sure they actually died. And we do have the history of Ajamil, that's for sure. So we should stick to that. These other things are personal experiences of people. They may or may not be true. We don't know for certain. Okay.
But even Ajamil, he didn't die. He was on the verge of dying when the Yamadutas came to take him.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, if they had taken him, that would have been death. but they was about to take him, but they didn't. Then the Vishnu disappeared. As you said, this is absolute. When you die, you dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about
You sure about that?
what the Bhagavatam says.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That the Yamadutas came to take him. But before they did that, the Vishnu disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
You know that they went with them already. No, they were about to take him.
Okay.
Then the Vishnu disappeared.
Okay. We're reading about Jamil in the children's class, so I'll double check that. Good. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, the one thing they just said that, they said that Jamil actually, he didn't die. They use that term. He didn't die.
Okay.
प्रसादे पूरे सर्वाशा प्रसादे पूरे सर्वाशा जक्षुदान दिल जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से जक्षुदान दिल जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेद गाय जहर चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु लोकना लोकेर जीवाना लोकना लोकेर जीवाना आह प्रभु कुरु दया देह मोरे पदचया आहा प्रभु कुरु दया देह मोरे पदचया आहा प्रभु कुरु दया देह मोरे पदचया प्रभु कुरु दया देह मोरे पदचया ये बेजास गुशुक्रि भुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना गुरुदेव लोयल शरणा प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Prabhu Nityananda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Paravaji, Srimad is divine grace. A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Namacharya, Das Thakur ki jai, Thank Shri Prabhu Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkund Radha Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional states. I bow down to this lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By His grace, we can cross your suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is that my consciousness purified by the words emanate from His lotus feet. Attachment to His lotus feet is perfection and fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart. He is my Lord. From Him ecstatic emanates my hand destroyed.
Vedic scriptures saying of His character,
Our spiritual master, the ocean of mercy, defendant of foreign Lord and master of devotees. O Master, give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter in your lotus feet, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.